Good evening. When the youth committee asked me to give a talk in the auditorium, I thought several times about it and lost my voice for a couple months. Then after that, I recovered my voice, so they said, well, what about it? And I had a topic about the gleanings. And I thought the gleanings, that's no challenge for any kind of a talk. So how about the Haykal? So I jumped into it really without recognizing the challenge and vastness of the subject. So, having titled the talk An Approach to a Study of, I think we can almost get away without getting to the study of. We can just talk around the subject as best we can. But I hope in the process that we will be able to generate enthusiasm about going back to this text if you haven't already read it. The Haykal, as Baha'u'llah's other writings, requires certain principles, the application, if you will, of certain principles indicated in the writings that help us to understand divine texts. And I've collected a few words here. First of all, you're all familiar with the fact that Baha'u'llah calls us in the Akká to immerse ourselves in the ocean of his words. This would seem to indicate that we have to dedicate a fair amount of time to reading the texts. People who have experience in this in the past told me that you need to preferably set aside a certain time of day and a certain place where you sit and study. It tends to put you back in the mood immediately for study. This is a little side remark for you. Baha'u'llah says that the reading of the scriptures and holy books is for no other purpose except to enable the reader to apprehend their meaning and unravel their innermost mysteries. Otherwise, reading without understanding is of no abiding profit unto man. Then, with regard to the prerequisites for understanding the texts, he says, and here this is as the last quotation, this is from the Kitab-i-Gan. He says, the understanding of his words and the comprehension of the utterances of the birds of heaven are in no wise dependent upon human learning. They depend solely upon purity of heart, chastity of soul, and freedom of spirit. Abdul-Baha in turn says that we should investigate and study the Holy Scriptures word by word, so that you may attain, he says, to the knowledge of the mysteries hidden therein. Again, he says, be not satisfied with words, but seek to understand the spiritual meaning hidden in the heart of the words. They are symbolical and contain realities of spiritual meaning. The Bab, for his part, describing the words of God, says that each one of these words has hidden meanings, has a hidden meaning, specific hidden meaning. And that hidden meaning also has a hidden meaning. And that hidden meaning has an innermost hidden meaning of its own. He goes on 5 levels of this. And he says we can explain all these meanings. Now, we're trying to look at the surface of the thing tonight. Baha'u'llah says we cannot divorce. This is from Shoghi Effendi. Shoghi Effendi says, he's quoting from Baha'u'llah. Later on in the passage, he says, we cannot divorce the letter from the spirit of the words. As Baha'u'llah says, we should take the outward significance and superimpose upon it the inner. Take the outward significance and superimpose upon it the inner. Either without the other is wrong and defective. And in Baha'u'llah, in some of his tablets, elaborates on this. What does it mean, He says, wash your face before you say your obligatory prayer. He says, someone inclined to mystic meanings might mean you should wash yourself with the water of life. You should turn to God. Forget about washing your face. He says, don't forget about washing your face. The meaning is there in the text. Don't throw away the outward meaning, but add to it the inner meaning. Okay, so we wash our face. I've turned my face unto thee, O my Lord. Illumine it with the light of thy countenance. It's full of spiritual meaning, but you're supposed to wash your face. And likewise, so many passages that could be interpreted, deviating, if you will, from the very plain meaning that they have. The more we read the words, the Guardian said, the more we read the words, the more will the truth they contain be revealed to us. And there's a passage from Baha'u'llah where he says that the verses reveal the meaning of the verses. You know, we find words in the writings, for example, living waters. And we go to the dictionary and we look up living, and then we go and we look up waters, and we can't make any sense out of what we're reading. Living waters is a term. It's made up of words we know, but it has another significance. How can we find the significance? If we begin examining the texts, we could do a survey across the text of all the places where Baha'u'llah speaks about living waters or water of life, and we begin to find there's a variety of living waters. We begin to find some identification, some time sense. He says the living waters are pouring down at every moment, at every instant. We find identification, where Baha'u'llah says, I am the water of life. We find prerequisites for attaining to the living waters. We find you could list, I think I found about 25 rewards and confirmations, if you attain to the living waters, the promises that Baha'u'llah makes about what the effect on attaining that will be in your life. Likewise, all of these various passages we come to, some of them seem so enigmatic and difficult. We should search for other verses that have some bearing on them. And as we build up a repertoire of this, we'll see how the harmony between all these begins to fit together. And it helps to open the meaning of the words, and gives us fresh excitement every time we see it. Besides that, outside of our study, our own Baha'i life, our activities, the challenges, the tests we have, prepare us in a way to see deeper into the meaning of the texts as we grow, as our experience broadens. The Haykal, the Suriy-i-Haykal, as you know, constitutes more than half of this volume of Baha'u'llah's writings that the House of Justice has given us, the summons of the Lord of Hosts. And the Haykal, in this published version, consists of the Surah of the temple itself, the beginning of it, and then appended to it, Baha'u'llah has added his tablets to Pius IX, Napoleon III, Czar Alexander II of Russia, Queen Victoria, and his tablet to Náṣiri'd-Dín Sháh of Persia, the Lohi Sultan. The history, a little bit of the history of the Haykal. It was first revealed in Adrianople. There are three distinct versions of the Haykal. The Adrianople Haykal was revealed obviously towards the end of Baha'u'llah's stay there, because it refers to the rebellion of Mirza Yahya in a number of passages. It calls, most of its addresses to the people are addressed to the people, but through the Babi community, addressing the Babi community and generalizing that to people in general. Their attitude, their response to the faith, to his message. Some of them, he says, that they have hesitated, and others they have rejected. And he refers to the ones who have hesitated as being in the shadow of the netherworld, and the ones who have rejected as having plunged themselves directly into it. The Haykal became known in the community, and when Baha'u'llah was exiled here to the Holy Land, the tablets of the kings, which had, of course, he began to reveal the Surah Muluk, which is also in this volume, the original tablet to the kings, were supplemented by tablets to individual monarchs, of those that I had just read from the table of contents. And when Baha'u'llah had finished revealing those, he said that these should be appended to the Haykal, to the Surah of the temple, and that would become the overall Surah of the temple. In other words, they were destined from the beginning to be part of that. So you have an expanded version of the Haykal, the second version. Not only that, but Baha'u'llah re-revealed the Haykal. So it's actually a distinct work. And in numerous passages, he substituted and broadened the theme in different ways, so that it addressed beyond the Babi community, the Muslims, the Muslim clergy in particular, and Islam in general, and broadened the whole message so that together with the tablets of the kings, this constituted what became known, what he announced was the very building of the temple promised in Zechariah in the Old Testament. Now, before I read these passages here, thus speaketh the Lord of hosts, saying, Behold the man whose name is the branch. And we know from some answered questions that this branch is not the branch Abdul-Baha, but the branch Baha'u'llah. And he shall grow up out of his place, and he shall build the temple of the Lord. Even he shall build the temple of the Lord, and he shall bear the glory, and shall sit and rule upon his throne. There's that quotation, and also from Zechariah. Let's see if I can find that here. I can tell you I'm a little overwhelmed by this subject. Anyway, in Zechariah, he talks about the building of the temple. And in this particular passage here from Promised Day Has Come, where he describes this process of the most important of his tablets addressed to individual sovereigns, Baha'u'llah ordered to be written in the form of a pentacle symbolizing the temple of man, including therein as a conclusion the following words, which reveal the importance he attached to those messages and indicate their direct association with the prophecy of the Old Testament. This is a paragraph that Baha'u'llah appended to the end of the whole work. We have the Surah of the Temple, then we have the tablets of the individual sovereigns, and finally a final paragraph which he added. Thus have we built the temple with the hands of power and might, could ye but know it. This is the temple promised unto you in the book. Draw ye nigh unto it. This is that which profiteth you, could ye but comprehend it. Be fair, O peoples of the earth. Which is preferable, this or a temple which is built of clay? Set your faces towards it. Thus have ye been commanded by God, the help in peril, the self-subsisting. Follow ye his bidding, and praise ye God your Lord, for that which he hath bestowed upon you. He verily is the truth. No God is there but he. He revealeth what he pleaseth through his words be, and it is. And again in another tablet addressed to the followers of Jesus Christ, Baha'u'llah proclaims, O concourse of the followers of the Son, verily the temple hath been built with the hands of the will of your Lord, the Almighty, the All-Bounteous. Bear then witness, O people, unto that which I say. Which is preferable, that which is built of clay, or that which is built by the hands of your Lord, the revealer of verses? This is the temple promised unto you in the tablets. It calleth aloud, O followers of religion, haste ye to attain unto him who is the source of all causes, and follow not every infidel and doubter. This tablet then, the Composite Haykal, became known among the friends, and Baha'u'llah wanted it circulated promptly, because in it, particularly in the tablet to Napoleon III, he makes certain prophecies, and also with regard to the Náṣiri'd-Dín Sháh, that were fulfilled within 9 months of the revelation of it. This was his second tablet to Napoleon III, and in it he says that we saw that you threw behind your back the first tablet, and for what you have done, your dominion will pass from your hands. Here we have the prisoner of Akká shut in this dank Turkish prison, pronouncing to the most powerful sovereign of the world that he is about to lose his kingdom. And Baha'u'llah wanted the friends and enemies of the faith to know about this prophecy ahead of time so they could watch it unfold. And that's exactly what happened. And the consular agent here in Akká, who sent the tablet through to France with a translation that he'd made from the Arabic, indeed embraced the faith after he saw the fulfillment of these prophecies. Who could imagine that anyone could foresee such things? For most of the friends, even up to now, the Eastern friends, that was the picture of the Haykal. It was that second version. And the scholars in the East used to refer to that. In fact, it was republished not too many years ago. The research department did a lot of work. A group of other friends in the research department, particularly I should mention Mark Hellaby, who did endless studies of the Haykal and of its history, found in the end that there was a third version of the Haykal. And I remember the translators coming to me on one occasion and saying, there's certain anomalies in the Arabic, that is, in the second version of the Haykal, that don't correspond completely to the best grammatical forms as understood by the people, by scholars. Along comes a third version, which Baha'u'llah reveals in the late 1880s, as far as we can tell, in preparation for the publication of 2 volumes of his writings, the first printing of his own writings, that he himself was the editor and prepared them. And one is the Kitab-i Aqdas, the book that contains the Kitab-i Aqdas and other supplementary tablets, and the other was a book called Kitab-i Mobin, and the featured tablet in that, the opening of it, is the Haykal itself, with the composite Haykal. And all these grammatical points have been changed to reflect proper usage according to the people. Baha'u'llah in a tablet says, we wish not the people to fall into perdition because of these points. Therefore, we have revised the tablet in accordance with the standards of the people. But elsewhere he says that the divine grammar is above the grammar of the people. In the future, people will study the divine grammar. After all, the grammar of Arabic generally comes from Islamic usage. Now he's saying that the way the tablets are revealed from the heaven of revelation, this is the standard of grammar. But it's too much for the people right now. So he's allowed these other versions. But it doesn't mean that the previous versions have disappeared. They still are extant, and they still are solid literature. So the house took the position we have 3 Haykals. One is not a correction of the other. They are discrete and are for distinct purposes, and the 3 of them surely will be looked at and studied in the future. There's not a tremendous amount of textual difference between the second and third version. Rather, it's as I say, the conformity to certain rules of grammar. Now, all of that becomes lost to us in the English version, where it comes out according to English grammar, and all very proper. Interestingly enough, the Haykal is not addressed to any individual. Of course, the parts to the kings are addressed to the kings, but we're talking about the first part, the Surah of the temple in its own discrete form. Now, that is usually not the case. Most of all the works of Baha'u'llah are addressed to someone. Even major works like the Eshriqat and so on have someone they're addressed to. This is similar to the Most Holy Book, which also is not addressed to anyone. And there are a number of parallel agreements between the contents of the Most Holy Book and of this Surah of the Temple. You can go and check them out, but you'll find out there's references to laws, there's appeals to the people, there's admonitions to the divines. The composite Haykal, of course, includes all these tablets to the kings. Quite interesting parallels you can draw there. Baha'u'llah has talked about this version of the Haykal, which he called to be created, and which this is not. This is a Haykal from the period of Baha'u'llah, but it's not the Suriy-i-Haykal. We don't have the Suriy-i-Haykal. We don't know at the moment where the copy that's referred to by Shoghi Effendi as having been written in the form of a Haykal is to be located. Perhaps in the future it will be found. Now, you can't see this well enough from there, but you see the form of it. It's a human form in the sense that it has the 5 major members of the human body, a head and 2 arms and 2 legs. And from Nabil, we learned that Baha'u'llah had the Suriy-i-Haykal written, and this is all written with very fine Arabic text here. In the original, he had this written in fine calligraphy in the top part of the Haykal. Then to the individual rulers, particularly the 4 Europeans that he addressed, including the Pope, and finally the tablet to Náṣiri'd-Dín Sháh. There was a section at the end for which he revealed this paragraph that I read you earlier, the closing paragraph of the Haykal. So the whole Haykal was built. And when he says the temple has now been built, it referred, from all that we can understand, to this tablet, this composite form. And of course, it's gone to. The translations been worked on by a number of people, and this is in accordance with Abdu'l-Baha's admonition that a group would need to translate this work. There was an early translation, perhaps some of you have seen it, just at the turn of the century, 1902, something like that, of Anton Haddad in the States, but it was, for the most part, very, very difficult to penetrate the meaning through the English of that particular English version. Shoghi Effendi, over the years, rendered several passages, but there really are small excerpts, you might say. They're identified in the end notes of the Sums of the Lord of Hosts, so you can find the things that he did refer to. When he quoted in one place a passage from the Haykal, he referred to it as one of the most challenging works of Baha'u'llah. So that's the task that's ahead of us in trying to study or approach a study of this, is to realize just how challenging this work is. The building of the temple, of course, as I say, is supported by prophecies. If we think of the whole version, at least my own take on it is that the first part is really the establishment by Baha'u'llah of his own station and position. The Haykal itself, the Surih-i-Haykal, proclaims Baha'u'llah's greatness. It elaborates on the powers and conditions of the manifestation of God. It unveils the arrival of the day of God, the appearance of the day of judgment, and the great promise of the raising up of a new race of men to inhabit the world. It proclaims his self and his station. The tablets to the kings appended to it proclaim his message and his station again. He incorporates very important passages about his station in those latter tablets as well. But the first part is exclusively dedicated to the question of his arrival and, if you will, the treatment that he should receive. The passages of it, as you've no doubt seen from your own observation that you've read through it, they alternate from a very joyous, ecstatic proclamatory, to admonitory passages in which Baha'u'llah warns. He changes voice almost and begins warning the people, do not be heedless of this call. And most of them he raises in those certain objections that the Babis had raised when he was in Adrianople during the development of his ministry there, after his own proclamation to the kings. And he addresses one by one these various concerns, so-called concerns of the Babis. It, of course, addresses the matter of Mirza Yahya and his deviation, and how the people had been deviated, had really gone astray because of him. And then it goes back to more proclamatory announcements about his own mission, about his, if you will, about his own station. There's a very interesting paradox here. What is the temple itself? Is it a written tablet? Or is it a human form? And even in its physical presentation, the way Baha'u'llah put it forth, the ambiguity of it remains. And I think we can only say, looking at all the passages which reflect both positions, that it exists simultaneously. And in fact, the manifestation of God is, on the one hand, a human form that represents God amongst the people, and on the other hand, he refers to himself as the living Word of God. The Word becomes flesh, and he calls his followers, his early followers, letters, and explains that these letters are the letters of the Word, and that from the primal point of his pen, he generates letters. So on the one hand, he generates followers, and on the other hand, he generates verses. This becomes very, very interesting to reflect on in terms of the propagation of the faith. That the propagation of the faith is both, if you will, illumination and enlightenment. Illumination by the establishment of Baha'u'llah as the primal mirror of the Son of Truth, that is, the historic person of Baha'u'llah, becomes the mirror of the divine Son of Truth, which is his own inward reality, and which is that reality that all the prophets of God share, and each of them mirror forth. That Son of Truth, which is the will, the all-encompassing, if you will of God, the primal will of God. He mirrors forth that in his person, that light. We'll maybe come back to this. It says in one place, not as seen in my temple, but the temple of God. One could say the same thing. Not as seen in Baha'u'llah, but the glory and light of God. And those who embrace his faith become mirrors of that light and that glory. So the propagation is of light on the one hand, of illumination that goes from soul to soul. So that we all remember the radiant Baha'is we met when we first became aware of the faith, or maybe it was our mothers looking in our faces. I don't know how. Many of you are from Baha'i families. And this light comes from Baha'u'llah. In his absence, it comes to us spiritually from Baha'u'llah. The medium of its coming, again, is confounded with the words. The verses of God bring us the illumination again. They increase it. We are all propagators of his light and propagators of his enlightenment, of the content of the verses. And the teaching work, if it goes ahead without both of those, suffers the losses inherent in that confusion. We need to have both happening. We need to think about ourselves as mirrors as well as knowledgeable Baha'is trying to absorb the text and understand that we want to be a source of radiance and light. I remember there was a Baha'i in the United States, Marjorie McCormick. She was an auxiliary board member when I first became a Baha'i in the 50s, and I went to a convention with her. I saw this lady sitting there looking at the convention gathering, and she was just radiating light. I mean, she was really radiating light. I don't know if I didn't wear glasses then, but it was bright. And I thought a lot about this. How did she get to this stage of luminosity? And she spoke on one occasion, and it was full of such love and had such a profound effect on the people. And later I came across some pilgrim notes. Marjorie McCormick in the 1930s, 1937, I mean, the year I was born, she was here, came and she talked to Shoghi Effendi and asked him about the teaching work and how she could carry out the teaching work. And of course, this is Pilgrim Notes, but it doesn't go counter to our teaching. And he said you must assume an attitude of radiating the love of God. You must consciously practice mirroring the love of God when you're talking to an audience. And he said gradually it will become a reality. It will grow. Well, I don't know. She seems to have gotten the key from Shoghi Effendi about this. She was so radiant. But it reminds me of this question of mirrors. And then, of course, if the Baha'is are radiant when they face each other, you have this marvelous promise of Abdul-Baha. It produces light upon light, great attraction, great joy, great happiness, because we're together, because each of us is facing Baha'u'llah. And so when we face each other, it reinforces the effect of that light, both in ourselves and in our friends and all the friends of God everywhere. There are a number of passages we could allude to. Let us look at paragraph 43. The measure of all created things hath been appointed in this concealed and manifest temple, wherein lie enshrined the knowledge of the heavens and the earth and of all things past and future. Is this the human temple, the person of the manifestation, or is this the book? The finger of God's handiwork hath inscribed upon this tablet that which the wisest and most learned of men are powerless to fathom, and hath created therein temples inscrutable to all save his own self, could he but apprehend the truth. Blessed be the one who readeth it, who pondereth its contents, and who is numbered with them that comprehend. He moves right on and he says, not as seen in my temple, but the temple of God. So now we're back to the human form. You'll find, as you're reading through, if you haven't already thought about this, you'll see so many passages that go both ways. And it moves back and forth. The verses, the divine verses, the propagation of the verses that Shoghi Effendi used as an example of the growth of the cause all over the world when he said that isolated believers were like letters, and the groups that they generated around them were like words, and that the local spiritual assemblies were like sentences, and the national spiritual assemblies were like chapters of a book, and the book itself was the universal house of justice. He uses the same, again, the overall run, if you will, sequential outline of the Haykal, of the Suriy-i-Haykal. You remember it opens with what we could call, or what we would have called in Christianity, beatitudes. Blessed be, blessed. So many blessings he gives, and glory be unto. The whole series of this beautiful opening. And then it turns to the Maid of Heaven. And then there are these series of passages in which the temple is addressed as a whole. But then intercalated within those are a number of the passages related to discrete members of the temple. So now we have the temple as a human form, and we have reference here to the eyes of the temple, the ears, the tongue, the hands, the feet, the breast, and the heart. As he's moving through that, he gets to the section on the hand, which is the most elaborated one. And within that, he says, and these are the meanings of the letters of the temple. H, Y, K, and L, which are the consonants in Arabic that make up the word. Short vowels in Arabic are not written. So you've got two short A's, hey, ka, that fill the word out so that you can pronounce it. It's pretty hard to pronounce H-Y-K-L. And then he goes through each letter and he says, from this letter hath been generated this subject, and from this, that. He's got these four letters, the ha, the ya, the kaf, and the lam. And he elaborates on the meaning that they have. Now he's moved from describing the human form of the temple to the written form of the temple, both producing effects in the world very similar. So again, you have this dichotomy back and forth between the two. The question of voices is a very interesting one. Who's speaking in the tablet? You have the you have what we immediately presume to be three speakers. You've got God speaking to the manifestation. You've got the voice of the Maid of Heaven speaking to humanity. And you have the voice of Baha'u'llah speaking to the people. So you have many passages addressed, O living temple, and which is this temple as a whole, coming, you presume, from God. Then within that, there are a number of passages, numerous passages that begin with the word say, which we all are familiar with in the rites, with a colon after it. And then there's a passage. And for the most part, you understand that Baha'u'llah is being instructed by God to say the following to the people. In a way, it softens the position that Baha'u'llah assumes in the tablet, because he's quite clear about proclaiming this to be the day of God, and that the one who speaks in this day is he who proclaims, verily, verily, I am God, and there is none other God but me. Very, very challenging. Not too long ago, 2 revelations back, we had Muhammad saying, I heard the angel Gabriel say that he heard from God that he should tell you to do this. Now, we have this transformation. We have this culmination of the revelatory process that Baha'u'llah refers to in the Gone, where he says that the manifestations of God, if they say, I am God, it's true, and it's nothing but the truth, because in such a condition, their own nature is so effaced that they're able to speak in the first person of God for the human race. And this is the promise of the Quran, of the Bible, that in the time of the end, you will attain the presence of God. The Lord will come and will gather his own. The day of God, the promised day of God. In a sense, sometimes when we're teaching and so on, it's a bit difficult, this question, people say. How can Baha'u'llah proclaims his own divinity, so to speak? On the other hand, try to imagine who could have proclaimed it beside Baha'u'llah, who could have understood it to tell us who he was. The manifestations of God have to tell us who they are. And I think that he talks about the jubilee and celebration which must greet this most great day of God is something that as we become more and more Baha'is in the world, this will become the cause of terrific celebration. Our gatherings and the recounting of all these wondrous tablets, speaking about the day of God, the appearance of God, the presence of God in our midst, and so on. Look what Shoghi Effendi's chosen as a title for the history of the first Baha'i century. God passes by. And yet we have to realize that behind that Sun of Truth, behind all of these words that come from the manifestation of God, where he mediates, if you will, he's the mouthpiece of God, he speaks as God, he really defines God's purpose for our creation. Behind that is an invisible essence, unknowable, nameless and placeless. With the latest reading of this, I've gotten, I think, maybe blasphemous, I don't know, but I say, God, where does the name God go back to? Does it reach back to the supreme, invisible, innermost essence? We have it as a label for that. But that word has come out of the mouth of the manifestations of God, and it goes back to them. There's a passage in the prayers where he talks about that. All the names and attributes of God, everything we want to praise God about, comes from the mouth of the manifestation, comes from his being, and returns back unto him. We direct our prayers to him. Where else are we going to direct them? We tend to think sometimes of God in a very vague kind of flowery way, or cloud-like, or very far off or something. And this is why Baha'u'llah more and more brings us to focus on the manifestation itself. And Abdu'l-Baha says when we say the obligatory prayers, we should be turning to Baha'u'llah and to none other than Baha'u'llah. But it doesn't mean Hossein Ali. It means that light that's present in his nature. And he says that also in several letters. We have to keep it straight so we don't, We can't say Baha'u'llah is God, but we can't say that he's other than God. There's even a marvelous tablet in Persian which says that some of the believers say that the manifestation is God, and some of the believers, I'm paraphrasing, making it short, some of the believers say that the manifestation is the source of the instructions and laws of God. Baha'u'llah says both are right, unless they argue about the subject. Because, of course, the manifestation has these two aspects. He has his outer nature, and he's a legislator, he is a lawgiver, and on the other hand, he's the Son of Truth. Now, you find throughout this tablet the voices taking turns in proclaiming whatever the subject, the theme is. It passes between God, Baha'u'llah addressing the people, and Maid of Heaven comes in at the beginning of it and again at the end of it. You could view this as a kind of a trinity, a Baha'i Trinity, which doesn't include the Godhead itself, but is made up, if you will, of the source of light, the light itself, and the recipient of the light. The source of the light would be the Son of Truth, which is the innermost reality, if you will, of each of the manifestations of God. The light itself corresponds then to the Holy Spirit in the traditional formula of the Trinity and the fact. And then you have the recipient of the light. Or the Master in one tablet where he actually refers to this, what is the meaning of the Trinity, because he says there is such a Trinity in the faith. He refers to the source of grace, the grace itself, and the bearer of the grace, he who receives it and gives it to us. So that's something to think about when you're reading it. As to the Maid of Heaven herself, if we examine the various passages in Shoghi Effendi's writings, and we're running out of time to do that, but you can look at them on page 101 of God Passes By, and you can look at it on page 100 of Messages to America, and again there's references on 101 of Citadel of Faith. This most great spirit, because in the Baha'i revelation, Baha'u'llah calls what we would have called the Holy Spirit in past revelation, in Christianity, for example, he calls it the most great spirit. And he speaks about the most great spirit personated in the form of a maiden. And in another passage he says, the most great spirit appeared unto Baha'u'llah in the guise of a maiden. So we're talking about a drama taking place within the nature of Baha'u'llah himself, where his own spirit is personated. This is an interesting word, not impersonated. Shoghi Effendi uses the word personate. The maiden personates the most great spirit. The most great spirit is the name of one reality that in the past been called, I think it's all talking about one same reality. Shoghi Effendi identifies it in God Passes By, the symbols of this spirit in past dispensations, the sacred fire in the Zoroastrian faith, burning bush in Moses' dispensation, the dove, the angel Gabriel, and now the symbol in the Baha'i revelation of the Maid of Heaven. Notice there's a progression of kingdoms there. You're starting with fire, and then you're moving on to a bush, and then you're moving on to the animal, the dove, a masculine symbol, and then a feminine symbol. With regard to the identification of the speakers in the tablet, there is a tablet in the voice of Mirza Agha Jan, who was the amanuensis of Baha'u'llah, which we understand were all dictated by Baha'u'llah, in which he makes this very startling statement. In the Haykal, referring to the Haykal, he says, the addresser and the addressee are one, which is mine own self, who ruleth over all the worlds. And again on another occasion, as for the addressee in the Haykal, this is the outward aspect
of his most holy temple. He, exalted be his majesty, at times addresseth the outward aspect of his temple with the tongue of its inner aspect, and at other times doth the reverse. You've seen those passages where Baha'u'llah appeals to God, his own higher aspect. Thus did I hear with mine own ears while present before the throne in the company of others. He's made this note at the end of a tablet. So this is something for us to meditate on with regard to who is the speaker and who is spoken to. He refers to the day of God. And in one passage in paragraph 63, he says that he himself is the day of God. So many passages about the day of God, Baha'u'llah says, I am myself the day of God. Of course, he's the Son of Truth. Light is coming from him. Day is coming from him. He brings the day. He is the day. But God is very gracious. He steps back one and he says, this is the great day in which this happens and that happens and this happens and that happens. It's all proceeding from Baha'u'llah. In paragraph 51, he refers to 9 modes of revelation. There were 4 proclaimed in Islam: divine verses, prayers, commentaries, and treatises. The Bab adopted the same scheme of modes of revelation. He said that he revealed in those 4, plus one additional one, which was Persian. Sorry. Baha'u'llah says he reveals in 9 modes, and if you will, he will reveal in countless other modes. He says in the same part of the tablet. There's another tablet of Baha'u'llah which says, in the Suriy-i-Haykal you can find all these 9 modes, surely in the Composite, the Suriy-i-Haykal. So if you want to know where to go to look for them, you can look there. I remember myself that I had tried to make lists of them. You know, you find some references in God Passes By and others to homilies and commentaries and visitations in so many different forms. Or he says again in the Epistle to the Son of the Wolf, one time I speak in the voice of a mystic and another in that of a truth seeker or lawgiver, to give us some hint. What are these 9 modes? And in the memoirs of Haji Mirza Haider Ali, he says that he's seen the tablet of Baha'u'llah in which he names the 9 modes, but nobody can find a trace of it. I don't know, maybe it'll show up sometime. It'll be most interesting to identify. There were prophecies in Islam that when, in the great day of God, the call of God would be raised by God himself, and then Satan would raise a call behind him. And Baha'u'llah alludes to that here in paragraph 99, identifying the call of Satan with the call of Mirza Yahya, because after Baha'u'llah proclaimed himself the manifestation of God, Yahya made a counterclaim and claimed he was the manifestation of God. He said the evil one will appear in those days in a form and with such a display as has never been seen. So you have the foil of the light, the darkness. You have the end of the Haykal, is really the climax of everything, where again the Maid of Heaven is referred to. O Maid of Heaven, step forth from the chambers of paradise and announce unto the people of the world that he who is the best beloved of the worlds, he who hath ever been the desire of every perceiving heart, the object of adoration of all that are in heaven and on earth, the cynosure of the former and later generations, is now come. And that's all the voice I've got, so we think we'll finish there. Thank you very much.